Hello everyone. Before we get started, I want to go over your requirements for your projects for this week. This is week 17 and we're going to be doing stem snowflakes and salt dough projects. We have two projects available for this week. You want to just choose the one that you like. Younger students might have more success doing the salt dough project, so look at them both and decide which one you want to do. Take a photo of your projects and turn them into assignments in Teams or chat. If you're going to do the salt dough project, it's at the end, but watch all the directions here first before you skip on ahead to that part of the video or playlist. Make sure that you answer the questions that go with projects in order to get full credit. Make sure you turn them in. You can either write them down and take a photo, or you can type them up, or you can make a video of your answer. Your first question for this week's project is, what supplies and materials did you use in your project? Whichever one you decided to use, what did you make it with? The first project in the video or playlist is the STEM Snowflake project. And what is that? STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. You may also hear it called STEAM, where art is included. And STEM projects are meant to help you understand some concepts in science, technology, engineering, and math. You're going to be building your snowflake yourself, so you're going to be arranging lines and shapes in space to create a form. Those are some elements of art. And the pieces of the snowflake are all the same, which creates a repeated pattern around the center. Patterns are principles of design. And we're also going to be using a positive space, which is the snowflake, and a negative space, which is your background. Also, some important principles of design. If you're going to do the STEM Snowflake project, it's going to be pretty quick, but your basic requirement is to make sure that your finished product is balanced, so that if you cut it in half, you'd see a mirror image, which is the same on both sides, which is called symmetry. And since your snowflakes branch up from the center, it's actually called radial symmetry. And then your second question for the project is to write down what patterns have you seen or used in other school projects. Was it for reading, math, science, or social studies? Just describe what project you were doing. And if you need this to count as 2 grades for extra credit, then you need to send me a message and let me know. Don't skip any projects, but if you need that grade to come up, this would really help as long as you do very well on it and follow directions. Salt dough is kind of the same thing. Everybody loves salt dough. It's fine if you don't do the STEM snowflake. We're going to use a basic recipe, which is just plain flour and plain salt with water. You need to be showing that you care for your ingredients and supplies and follow the recipe to make it correctly. Got to follow directions to get this one done. We're going to mix it up and flatten the dough out and get used to working with it to create shapes and forms, because we're going to do some more projects with salt dough or clay later in the year. So we want to get used to using our hands and making things. You want to experiment with the dough. You want to try making different forms and maybe some tools, just anything that you have around the house that can help you to make what things you want to make in the clay. So experimentation is very important. We're not going to bake it. Just make sure that you can put your dough somewhere so that it can completely dry out overnight and turn nice and solid. We want it to be a hard surface. If you're going to do the salt dough project, you only need to use your hands. You don't have to decorate it. If you don't have other tools, that's fine. You're just wanting to show something that you can make using what tools you have that are available. Same thing with the STEM snowflake. So you want to keep your dough thin so that it dries faster. You want it to be thin, but not super, super thin. And then finally, your second question isn't really a question this time. Just tell me some different things that you tried to do with the dough. Describe maybe some shapes that you made, or the way that you used your hands, or some tools that you used to help shape the dough and create the form. Take a photo of your projects and send it to me. Don't forget to answer your questions. and let's get started. When we're talking about snowflakes, most of the time they're six-sided, and you can see on these really nice close-ups that they come from the center and going out to the edge, making a pattern that's the same on each piece. These are some nice, very, very close-up photos that can show how the pattern is formed. It's not always perfect. Like we can see in this one, it's a little bit unbalanced. And they're supposed to be clear, but for whatever reason, snowflakes show up as white. We don't have to make ours white. We can use whatever we have and whatever we want to do for our snowflake creations. What we're going to do is to build a similar pattern. You can see that these here have 6 sides. Sometimes they have 6, sometimes they have 8. And we want to make sure that we repeat that pattern on those sections. So that this one has 6, this one has 6. But if you make one that is 8, you want to make sure that whatever you do to one piece of your snowflake, you copy it and repeat it to all sides of the snowflake. This one here looks really complicated. It actually has 12 little stems coming out from the center, but most of the time you just see 6 distinct clear pieces of your snowflake. Some of them don't ever really get those little spikes coming out, like this one here, where it's just, you can see it's 6 sides, but it stays inside. And then sometimes you're going to get 8 sides to a snowflake, sometimes you'll get 12, because it's 6 and 6 again. So you are going to be making, if you're doing the stem project, we're going to do an 8-sided snowflake. If you want to do a 6-sided one, that's fine, but I don't have directions for that. So you want to think of a pattern that you would like to repeat, and we'll go ahead and get started with an 8-sided snowflake. Now on this project, I'm going to show you some stuff doing 2 different sizes of toothpicks over there, and then some clothespins you see at the top, and Q-tips. That does not mean that you have to have toothpicks or clothespins or Q-tips. You just want to look around and see if you can find some small straight objects that you could create in a radial symmetry pattern around a center. It's that simple. The rest of the design is up to you. So I have 8 clothespins because it has 8 sides. Here's some other things that we could try. We could do pipe cleaners. I think they call them chenille sticks. I have some cut orange pieces of foam, and some crayons even would be terrific. Straws would also be good. Lots of different things that you can try. I also have some craft sticks or popsicle sticks. Those are always easy to use. If you have those would be wonderful. And you can also get out some gems or glitter or anything else you want to use to decorate. Markers would be nice. Paper background is really helpful. You don't have to have one unless you're going to draw the background, but we just need to cut it out in the shape of a circle. And I'm going to be using some white glue because glue stick glue just doesn't really hold on to that well to a construction paper background. So I have different blues and a purple, nice cool colors to use for this project. The first thing we want to do when we're getting ready to make our snowflake is to decide what things we want to make it out of. You can use clothespins. I have 8 here, and I'll show you how to pull these apart. And Q-tips are good. And then I have toothpicks. I have long toothpicks and short ones. And they all cut pretty easily in half as long as I had sharp scissors. Using my dull scissors, I really had to work hard on these. So you could cut them in half like these here. And with the Q-tips, you could cut them in half, but you could also cut just the tips, since these hold on to glue pretty well. So you can make a combination of things there. And then you can also get out anything fun that you might have around, like I have a sheet of gems that I never used, and some other multicolored ones here that might be fun, and some metallic markers that would go nicely on here. You could also add glitter and things, but I'm not going to do that for this project. Those are optional, and I can show you what it would look like, but it's not required. So use what you have. Maybe you just have Q-tips. Maybe you just have clothespins. We can always draw decorations on. So you just want to make sure that you have, if you're going to use clothespins, you need at least 8 We're going to do an 8-sided snowflake. And Q-tips, if you have a bunch, the more the better. That way you can make as many decorations as you want. And then toothpicks if you have them, but be careful because they are pointy on one end. You don't want to poke your skin as you're working on the small toothpicks. They're pointing on both ends, and then on the large toothpicks it's just the one end. So you want to get your supplies together that you can make your project with. And if you're using clothespins for this project, let me show you what you want to do. You want to take them apart. You just got to watch this little spring here. So I'm just pulling on it. All I'm going to do is pull it on out and slide out the piece of wood. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And if you're going to use these, they don't want to stick together like this. So it just doesn't want to work together because we've got 8 points, and they're just not gonna, it's just not going to be enough for the glue to hold on to. So I'm taking these apart, but then what I can do is, instead of them looking like this, I'm going to flip them inside out and put their flat sides together. So if you're going to use clothespins, you can take each clothespin apart, take the spring off. Make sure nobody needs your clothespins, but you can just take them apart and get them ready to glue together. Once you do those, these corners meet together very nicely to make your snowflake. And then we also need to find a background to put it on. So if you have some nice blue or purple paper, that's a really great place to start. Nice cool colors, maybe green, but anything will work. White paper, whatever you have. And we want to cut out a circle to put them on. I've got several of them cut out and ready to go so that I can make lots of different snowflake examples to show you. So you want to find something circular that you can trace. I just happen to have these from a melted snowman project that we'll do later, but I just traced these from bowls. So you want to find a circular object that you can trace. This is actually my classroom clock here. This will be fine. And I want to make sure that it's going to be big enough for my project. So what I really want to do is make sure it's a little bit bigger than my snowflake so that I can put it on the edge. So here's a, sorry, it's the wrong time there, but if I put my clothespins across it and they fit in there nicely, then I would know that that would be a good circle to cut. So when you're doing a bowl or a plate or anything that's nice and round that you can cut out your paper with, you just want to make sure they fit on there before you draw it on the paper. So this one would be pretty good, and it shows up better on the video. So I will, I think I just traced this from a plate originally. I'm just going to put that on my paper. One of the great things about these projects is these papers here, for example, they're all like, I think they've gotten wet or something. They're still usable. This is a great time to use those scraps. And I can put that on there and say, okay, well, I don't want that part of the paper, but the rest of this paper is really good. I can use this to make my circle drawing with. And, you know, maybe this is too big. Maybe I need a smaller one. I have to measure. You know, maybe this would be better for Q-tips, but that's getting really close. That's really, really pushing it. That means I would have to have these right next to each other. And I want mine to be a little bit bigger so that I can put my items wherever I want them to be. So like for the long toothpicks, for example, that's too small, but this would be pretty good. So I have to find my circular object and make sure that I can fit the pieces across it. And then I'll go ahead and draw it on my paper. We did this in previous projects, so hopefully you are very good at this by now. I'm just holding it, and I can just keep going on around it so I make sure that pencil shows up. It's a good time to, you're just making sure that it doesn't move. Hold your hand on there without, you know, you don't have to push too hard. And I'm just drawing with the pencil like I would normally draw when I write. And then when I lift it off, I see that, and I'll go ahead and I would cut that out. So I already have some cut out and I'm ready to go. So we'll move on to the next part. All right, so make sure that you have paused the video and cut out a nice circle that you're going to put your snowflake items on. I'm just going to take these springs off of these clothespins, and I'm going to go ahead and glue these together back to back so that they look like this. So I'm going to do that with each one of my clothespins. So instead of them looking like a little alligator mouth, we want to flip it around so that their flat sides are glued. So we want to give it a pretty good amount of glue, but not, you know, don't pour it. We want to make sure that we're using a dot of glue and we spread it. So I get a dot of glue and I spread it with my orange tip. Dot of glue here, spread it with my orange tip. That's what it's there for. And then I can go ahead and put it with the other piece. And if I don't use a lot, it'll dry fast. A lot of kids want to use a lot of glue, and it will dry, but it may not, you know, you might have to be waiting around for a long time, because if you pick things up before they're dry, they'll just fall apart. And this one's already, just because I didn't use a whole lot of glue, it's already trying to grip onto the other pieces. If this were pouring in glue, it would take so much longer to dry. So I'm going to go ahead and I have 8 clothespins, and I'm going to put them, I'm going to glue them against each other and then lay them out on my paper. So if you're working with clothespins, go ahead and pause the video, take the springs off, and glue them so that the flat sides of the 2 sides of the clothespin are put together. So I'll go ahead and finish that up, and then I'll start the video again. All right, so I've got my 4 clothespins that I'm starting with that are ready to go, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do with those. You can glue these together if you wanted to, but I'm putting them on a paper background to make them sturdier. And I'm just moving them in from the edge. You can see right there, they're going to match up really nicely, and I can put some glue on these to make them stick to the paper and touch each other. So it looks really nice. And then what I can do with my other 4 is I can come into the corners, and they fit in there really nicely. They just tuck on in, and you can go ahead and put those in. Now what we want to do with this, the whole important part about doing this project is planning. So we want to take a look at everything and not worry about using a whole bunch of glue right now. If I'm using my Q-tips for my other one, I'm going to make the same thing with an 8-sided snowflake, and I want to make straight lines, and I'm sort of going to the edge here. Maybe I want to keep them on the edge, okay, but I'm sort of going towards the edge of the circle, and I'm starting out with these 4. If you look at it this way, it kind of looks like a plus sign, and if you look at it this way, it looks like an X, but you want to look for the lines that are kind of going straight across, so that I'm going to line them up, and then maybe I want to move them a little closer to each other in the center, but maybe I don't. What I want to do is experiment and try some different things. So that's 4, and then I just want to put the other ones in between. So in between each side of my X, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's a total of 8 Q-tips. And from here I can decide, okay, do I want these to move a little closer to each other? All we're doing is planning. So when I do these examples, you need to take over and make what you think is a really nice finished product. All I'm going to do on this project is to show you some different options that you have, different things you could try. When you're done with your planning and you're happy with it, you want to pick each piece up one at a time, add glue, and stick it back down. If you only do one at a time, you should be able to remember where you left it. If you're going to cut the Q-tips, they cut pretty easily. Just make sure you got good sharp scissors, and maybe you want to cut them in half, maybe you just want the tips. So if you just want the tips, okay, sharp scissors should cut through pretty easily, but if they don't, what you can do is sort of spin it. You see I'm sort of turning it and pushing down with my scissors, and then I can try to push down. Now, if this is tough for you, don't do it. If this is not something that you think you can handle, don't worry about it. You don't have to cut anything for this project if you don't want to. But if you decide that you want to design a snowflake that has little pieces, maybe that is part of your design. You can do the same thing with the toothpicks. Maybe if you have combinations of different things, you can try different stuff out. I could take some Q-tips here, some toothpicks, and maybe I want to put some toothpicks in with my Q-tips. So I could do that. I want to just design. I want to plan. I want to think about what I want these to look like. All I want to make sure of when I do my design, this is all you have to do for this project. If I'm going to do something to one of the pieces, I want to do it to all 8 pieces, and that's so that it is symmetrical. Symmetrical means that if you cut it in half, it would look the same on both sides, like either a mirror image or exactly the same, depending on what the design is. So there's something you could do there, right? But you have to decide if you want to do those. And toothpicks cut pretty well with the scissors as well, but you don't have to cut anything at all. Now, let's say that you're happy with Q-tips or clothespins, and you want to draw something on. If I'm going to draw a design, for example, and I want to go ahead and add it in between here. Maybe I want to draw some nice circles or something. I'll draw a circle here. Okay, but when I do that on this, in between these 2 Q-tips, I want to do it in between my other Q-tips too. So if I'm going to draw a circle or do something to add to my design, I need to do it 8 times. And I'm just holding it and going around. This is a nice metallic marker. Any kind of fun markers that you have or fun colors that you like to use would be good. If you have some sparkly things that are something that you want to add, go ahead. This is your time to be creative. So you could draw it or you can place things on it. And I can get out some of those gems and design. I can put them on the snowflake, on the paper, on the Q-tip, on the toothpick, whatever I decided to use. And the important part of this project is not to copy anything that I've done. It's that you are creating your own design. So are you going to, like say you did clothespins, maybe you want to color the pieces of the snowflake. Maybe you want to color your clothespin pieces, and maybe you want to add, these are the shorter toothpicks, which would be easier to use. And maybe you want to add some things. So I'm not all the way done. If I'm going to do this, I need to go all the way around. Okay, so if I'm only going to do one of these in between each side of the snowflake, I only need 8 toothpicks. But then let's say that I want to do 2. You got to decide how many supplies that you have. So your challenge is to make sure that everything that you do is copied around to every part of the snowflake. All right, so here are some finished examples. I just added some toothpicks onto this one that has the purple background. And then if you can cut Q-tips or toothpicks, you can make all kinds of different arrangements, but it's not necessary. You can add some gems or some more drawings in between the pieces if you like. You can change all kinds of placements. This is the same snowflake, just with things in a different arrangement. But you don't have to cut anything at all. If you're going to cut, make sure that you're safe. And that you get help if you need it. If you're having trouble cutting things out, just go ahead and add some nice marker or something pretty on the edges that will make it look a little bit more finished if you want. But cutting is totally not necessary. You can go ahead and add gems and other things on it. All right, and one last little piece of advice before you start gluing things. Go ahead and take that picture and send the picture to me before you worry about gluing stuff. As you can see, since I moved these around on my desk to take pictures of them, some things kind of got out of place. So what's best to do is to go ahead and take that picture and then move it. And as you can see, like on a couple of these here, on this one you can see some of the snowflakes moved around and stuff. So that's fine. I have a photograph, and then I can look at my photograph to remember what my design looked like and remember how to put it back together. And then I'll go ahead and start to glue. So take the picture of your snowflake before you start applying glue, just in case something awful happens and all your stuff gets thrown all over the place and oh no, what a mess, and I have to start over. Well, it's okay. I already took my picture and I sent it to Ms. Powers for my grade, and I can fix it from here because I have a picture that I know what it looked like. So take your time gluing it, but make sure that you've sent me a photograph of your planned snowflake so that I can see what you created. Did you decide to draw? Did you decide to add things? Or did you go with a very simple and elegant design, which I think look really, really beautiful. So I can't wait to see your creations. Don't forget to send me a photo. You can either send it in assignments or you can put it in chat so that I can get your answers to your questions and a photo of your finished work. You can send it before you glue anything down, so get that done and make sure it's turned in on time. Everything is going to be due before December 10th. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, so in this section, we're going to get ready to make salt dough ornaments. Now, I'm not going to show you what they look like yet because I want you to watch the entire video first. So I'm going to give you a quick recipe and explain what you need to do. You need to have plain flour. It doesn't have to be enriched or bleached or anything like that, and plain salt. It doesn't have to be iodized. And you need some yarn or cord for the project that I'm going to show you today, but you'll need those after your pieces are dry, so you don't need them right away. I'm going to go ahead and put those away. And then we got to talk about how to measure things. You are going to need an area maybe like the kitchen or somewhere that has a clear surface that you can mash up the salt dough in. Sometimes I call it clay, but I just mean that it's the dough. We're going to make the dough. What you need is a 1/4 cup measurement. Now, this one is a little unusual. I bought these at the dollar store because I thought they were nice. It's not usually what cup measures look like. Cup measures usually look something like this. But you can see my labels that tell me how big they are have worn off. And they're too big anyway. So I happen to know that this one is a 1/4 cup. And I'll show you the side where you can see the measurements on it so that you know. And this is a 1/2 cup in the yellow. And this is a whole cup. Now if you get in there very close, you can actually see that they'll also measure half. So you don't need to know what a 1/4 cup is. It's just that for a cup, when you cut it up into smaller portions, if you cut it up into 2 portions, that's a 1/2 cup. And if you cut it up into 4 portions, it's a 1/4 cup. So you don't need to know fractions to do it, but you want to find something that is a 1/4 cup measurement. And this one has some water in it because we're going to use some water as well. Now don't just go ahead and grab water and make a big old mess. We want to do this carefully so that you're not going to have a sticky mess in your kitchen and you're not waiting all day for your items to dry. So you might want to have, if you're doing this in the kitchen, that way you'll have somewhere easy to clean up. You want to make sure that you have sponges or whatever around to, since this is just water, I'm just using a paper towel so that I have enough area to clean up. Now, if you don't have cup measurements of any kind, you don't have a 1/4 cup, but you do have teaspoons and tablespoons. This is a tablespoon measurement. I can tell because I can read it right there. So if that's all you have, it's 4 of these to make 1 of this. So if you need help with the math on that, or and this is all you have, please send me an email or send me a message in chat on Teams, and I will help you to make the measurements to do this. So what we need on our ingredients list, though, we need 1 of these to be filled with salt, and then we need to fill it with flour 2 times, and then we'll put in a little bit of water to mix those together to make the dough. And you're going to need a mixing bowl. I have an old beat up mixing bowl here that I've used many times. You don't want to eat this because it's just flour and salt. It's not tasty. But we're not going to worry about painting anything today or coloring any of it. That's going to be up to you to do. We're just going to do an introduction to salt dough. We don't have to make masterpieces, but we want to get used to how to make this so that we can do it for future projects. And we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so I am going to measure out 1/4 cup of salt. You want to make sure that you have whatever you need in case you have spills. You might want to do this in the kitchen so that it'll be easier to clean it up. So if you need sponges or paper towels, that would be fine. And I'm going to just shake that on down a little bit. Yep, and I can see on the inside that it's lining up with my 1/4 cup measurement. It's just about full, so I know that's about right. I'm going to go ahead and put that in my mixing bowl. Okay, so that's 1 of salt. So I can go ahead and close up my salt and put my salt away. And then I need 2 of these of flour. So I'm going to get my flour, and I have a small spoon to get it out of the bag. Because if you try to dump it out without a spout like the salt has, you could have a bit of a mess. And it's okay if I'm going to sprinkle a little bit because I can clean up right away. So make sure that if you are doing yours that you can clean up right away too. And take your time, just very gently going into the bag of flour and getting a little scoop. And I'm going to put it inside. And I don't need to rinse it out or anything. It's fine if I still have salt in there. Very, very slowly and gently get a little bit of flour. Put it in my container. A little bit of flour. Put it in my container. Now, when you make spills like that, don't worry about it. Just make sure that you clean up as soon as you're done, so you have a nice clean area to work with. And I'm really zoomed in, so it looks a lot worse than it is. And that's pretty good. Now with flour, you can kind of flatten it out. And that looks pretty good. I can see on here that it's just about full. So I'm going to put that in my mixing bowl with my salt. Now I need to do 1 more. So 1 container measurement of salt and 2 of flour. Now I'm going to encourage you, even though it might be annoying to have to make more than 1 batch, I would encourage you to just make 1 small batch at a time. You can keep the dough in a plastic bag, but it will probably still harden anyway if you have extra. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up and put it away. And I'm going to put my other thing of flour inside of my mixing bowl, and I can mix it up just a little bit with my spoon so that I can see that my salt and my flour are going to combine. Okay, so here is our next step. We got our nice blended flour and salt. It is still dry. And what I did is I got 1/4 cup container of water. Now you don't want more than this because you want to add it in a little bit at a time and stir it up. If you get too much water, it's going to be really, really sticky. It's not going to want to harden up. The more water that you put in, the stickier it's going to be. So we want to try to avoid that and make sure that it dries as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to put in a little bit, and I'm going to use a stronger spoon to mix it up. I've got a wooden spoon. You might have a big plastic spoon out of the kitchen. You could use like even a really large, like a metal spoon. So I'm going to add those in there just a little bit at a time. You can see it gets a little lumpy. And I've got a plastic area that I can put my item on. I'm going to add a little more and Go ahead and keep stirring it up. That little plastic spoon I had would probably break. So I'm just going to keep working with this here, and a little bit more. And I've used about half of my water up, but I want to make sure that I'm doing this slowly so that I can see that I'm getting all that salt that I can get until it doesn't grab up any more salt and flour, and I can see dry mixture. So I can see some dry stuff in there. Okay, I'll put in a little more. I might not use all the water. It depends on what I need. So I'm just going to keep on stirring this. Try to get that dry stuff in there. It's really starting to form a nice sort of Play-Doh consistency now. And a little bit more. And I think that's going to do it. So even though I have some water left, I don't think I need it. Try to get all that dry stuff in there. So it was 1 container of salt and 2 filled up with flour, and then 1 again with water. I want to do the water last in case I don't need it. If you're going to mix up another batch to make more stuff, you would want to dump this water out and dry out the inside of the container before you put any salt or flour in it, just so that you know that you have what you need and it doesn't become a liquid. So this is nice, and this is starting to firm up, getting thick. Okay, I had to pause the video for a second. This is a good time to pause it and work with your dough. So I didn't really need the spoon anymore, but I'm making sure that I'm getting every little bit of salt and flour that might still be left in my bowl. And this is pretty good firmness. If yours is sticky, like mine was when I first started, you can keep on stirring it and smush it around. The warmth of your hands, of your skin, will help to firm it up and get rid of some of that water. So here's a plastic area that I can use. You want to have some surface that you can either clean up easily or you can move your project easily. And I'm just still moving that around in my hands. Now you probably want to keep a little bit of water nearby in case you need to smooth things. But what I want to do is just going ahead and keep playing with it. I'm going to go ahead and stretch it out just with my hands. And I'm just pushing down with my fists and my fingers. If you have a rolling pin, that would be helpful, but it's not necessary. Even if you have like a toilet paper roll, you can, if you want to make areas perfectly flat. Okay, a couple of tools that we can talk about really quickly. Toilet paper rolls are great because you can use them like a cookie cutter. So if I want to make a circle, I can go ahead and punch through on that. What I want to do though, when I'm pushing on my dough like this, is to make it pretty thin. If it's thick, it's going to take longer and longer and longer to dry. So this here is still pretty thick. I'm going to go ahead and keep pushing it, and I'll push it whatever way I want, and I'm not going to worry if it's looking like it's cracking over the edges. If you have cookie cutters and you have a shape that you want to do, I have you know, a circle and a star and a heart and a flower floating around here somewhere. So these would be fun, but they're not necessary. What I want to do is make sure that my my dough is not sticky. It's not sticking to my hands. It's not trying to stick to my fingers when I let go of it. I got a pretty flat area. So if I want to use a cookie cutter, I can go ahead and just push down like it's cookie dough. I'm going to leave the cookie cutter there and pull away. And there I have a nice star or heart or circle or flower that I have in there. And then I can, if you cannot lift up your project like this, your dough is still pretty sticky. I can keep on going until I run out of dough, but I don't need a cookie cutter because I can make my own star. So you could do your own heart or other shapes that you might like. But I can do a circle with my toilet paper roll, left over from other projects, or paper towel roll, whatever you might have that's circular. If you have a gift wrap tube, that would be terrific. You could use the rim of a cup like we use for drawing circles. I just want to make the rest of my dough flat again, and I'll show you how you can take a circle and make it into a star. I'm going to go ahead and keep mine pretty small so that they'll dry. So if you do something big, that's fine. Just make sure that you have a place that you can let this dry really well overnight. If you lift it up like this one is here, it's nice and firm. You want to make sure that yours is pretty firm, that your fingers aren't still sticking to it, but it's not dry. I can still bend it, and I want to just leave it alone. So if I'm using a toilet paper roll or other circles that I might have, I can go ahead and push down, and I'll just leave it there, and I'll pull my dough up from around it, and I've made a circle. Now, in order to make this, if I wanted to make something small like this into a star, all I want to do is make little triangles to add to it out of my dough that's left. So I'll just pinch off some pieces, and maybe you'll want to make a star, maybe you'll want to make a whole bunch of triangles and make a sun. I'm just going to go ahead and put that on there, and I really want to blend my sides in to make sure that it is not going to come loose. Okay, so I'm going to do another one. And I'll just make a nice triangle shape. Make sure I've got my 3 points, and add another one. And I'll blend this into my circle. And the good thing about Play-Doh or clay or salt dough or anything like this that you're using, you could use the fancier stuff, but you don't need to, is that when you mess up, you don't have to worry about it. You just smash everything together and start over. So I'll make another one. Make my shape my 3 points. That's all I got to do. And it looks like a little cat ear. And I'm just going to keep on attaching them. I'm going to smooth my dough over. Now, if yours is starting to get super dry like mine, you could get your fingers wet, just your fingers, to help you smooth it. As a matter of fact, I'll pause right here and I'll go get some water and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so I have another container here, and I'm just going to get my fingers wet. I'm not going to put a lot of water on the dough, because then I'll end up with the same consistency I had when I was blending it. I'm just smoothing these over, and I'm just going to keep smoothing, smoothing, smoothing. So if you need yours to be nice and smooth and your clay is getting dry, you can do that and smooth it out with your fingers. So I'll make some more here, and I don't want my dough to be, I don't want my dough to get wet again, but having just a little bit of water on your fingers might help you work with the dough until you're happy with it. So I'll put in another triangle here, and I'm going to smooth it out and smooth it into the circle. And maybe just a little bit of a wet finger to help. And I think this last one's a little small, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And it's okay that my points aren't even. They're not perfectly sharp. It doesn't look as fancy as the cookie cutter, but that's okay. I actually like this kind of star better because it looks like it was more fun to make. This looks like a sugar cookie. It doesn't look like it had any real work put into it. So I'll go ahead and do that and blend it into my circle, and I have my nice star shape. Wet my fingertip. I just want to make sure that that's in there. Now, make sure you're not dealing with gooey dough again. You want to leave it alone as much as you can and not get it wet. If you want to flip it over, it's a good time to check to make sure that your points are attached. If your triangles or any other shape that you add on are not attached well, you can bet they're going to fall off. couple of things that you can do for that. You don't ever have to color these or paint these, but paint will help it to stick together a little bit more. So I can finish up my star, make sure my points look the way I want. I can flip it back over, or I can leave it like this. Either way is fine. So that gives us a nice star. Okay, and a couple of last things here. Just making sure that my points are the way that I want them. And I want to hang these up, so I want to poke holes in them. And that's so that I can string through a piece of yarn or cord. And I want to make it a pretty decent size. So the end of my paintbrush here is a good point, and I tried that, but it's kind of little. I want it to be a decent size so that I can get that string in there. If it's really tiny, I'm not going to be able to fit it through. So I need to find something thicker. This happens to just be a piece of wood that came with my brush set, but you could even try a straw. So now that I'm done with that, I'll check over here on the back and make sure that no dough is poking through. And looks like I need to fix up some of my points again. My dough is starting to get hard, and you might say, oh, okay, well, it's getting dry. Not really. It just doesn't want to move around that much. If your dough is very, very thick, like say you're making beads, you definitely want to leave it alone overnight. So I'm just going to make one more shape just to be fast here. I think I'll just do a heart. So I'm just making sure that it's big enough to hold my cookie cutter here. And I'll make my shape, pull my extra dough off. And when you're getting down to just little pieces of dough, you might want to make some beads. That might be fun. So if you're getting down to the end and it's really not going to be big enough to cut another shape with, maybe you can make a bead before it gets too dry. Squish your dough in your hands. It always feels kind of nice to do that. This is getting very dry, so I'm going to get my fingertips wet and just get that dough wet on the outside, just so that I won't have so many cracks. When you make beads, you want to look for cracks that might be in the dough. If you see cracks, you want to smooth those out right away. And I want to go ahead and puncture it all the way through. And it's like, uh-oh, it made a mess there. So look at it in this direction. It made a mess there. Okay, but you can fix it. I want to take off that little piece of dough that got pushed out from me pushing in the stick. And before I take the stick off, I will fix my bead. So you could make a whole bunch of beads and make a necklace. That's always a lot of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and put another hole in here. So when I'm cutting out shapes, I'm using cookie cutters, but you can also use a butter knife or a craft stick, popsicle stick type of thing to help you smooth. Use tools that will help you with those. But, you can see I did most of these just with my fingers, so it's fine. Just try whatever way that you like. This might be fun just to put, maybe a word on. Maybe when it's dry, I'll write dream on it, or maybe I'll put a name on here and give this to someone. But they make nice decorations just on their own. So maybe you can think of a word or somebody's name that you want to put on that. When they're dry, you can paint them. You can use markers on them. You just want to give them plenty of time to dry before you try to put any strings in them. So since this is just an introduction, this is just so that you can know that you can see compared to those, that's really, really big. So that's okay. But I'm just going to have to leave it lots of extra time to dry. And just leave it alone. I'm just going to twist this so it doesn't poke through quite as much, taking my time. There's that little piece that came through. Now you can put leftover dough in a plastic bag. You can do that, but it might still dry out anyway. I know that we like to do that and think that it's going to be okay, but there's already air in the bag when you close it that might dry your dough out. So I want to make sure that these, since they're starting to stiffen up and they're not as squishy anymore, I want to make sure that my holes look good. And then I'm going to leave these alone and let them dry. And then I'll show you how to put in the strings. So you want to get whatever strings that you have that you're going to put through if you're going to hang these up. They're a lot of fun to just sort of hang from, just like your curtain rods or a doorknob. They just look really nice, and it's a nice thing that you can give to someone if you maybe put their name on it or do a nice decoration in the inside. So if you're going to put stuff on top of it, you just want to get some glue. Maybe you want to put, if you want to put glitter on it, just put a little bit of glue, spread it around with your finger, and then you can sprinkle some glue on top, and they look really, really nice. So I'm going to leave these completely alone and let them dry, and then we'll come back in just a second. I'll show you, I'll skip ahead so that you can see in a few hours what they're going to look like when they're dry. Skip on ahead to the next day. Now, I don't know if you can see this. You can see that now they're really, they've got a nice texture to them. The dough has hardened up, and my items are ready for me to put in strings. Now, depending on what you want to do with it, you might want to cut short strings to hang them up on, if you're going to use this, say, on a Christmas tree. But if you're just going to use them for decorations around the house, maybe you want longer strings. Depends on where you want to hang them. This is a good time before you put any strings on them, that if you're going to paint, this would be really good. The other thing I forgot to mention, if you paint, it'll keep these a little bit sturdier. It might keep your little points from falling off, any attached pieces. But the other thing you can also do is brush some glue, or even just go across it with your fingers. So if you got some glue on your fingertip and you brushed it across here gently, that way it wouldn't scratch it, you could do that. Or if you have Mod Podge around, those help to keep those pieces on. It makes it a little sturdier. So depending on what you want to do, if I wanted to just hang this up, say in a window, I could do a knot like that, and I'll tie it one more time, just a simple knot, not a shoelace knot. Don't want it too tight. And then I could go in ahead and figure out how tall I want it to be, how long I want the string to be, how far do I want this to hang. So it depends on, do I want it to, is it going to hang from something that's only this far away or this far away? Until you're sure, you can cut lots of extra. So since I'm not painting mine, I'm just showing you how to string them. If you're going to paint, make sure you paint first so that your paint can dry. But all you have to do with your cords or string or ribbon or anything that you have is to go ahead and poke it through your hole here, and it depends on what you want to do to string it up. Now, if I'm going to try to loop it together for, say, an ornament, I'm going to cut my piece off and put my two ends together and try to get this nice and snug. I'm just sort of twisting it so it's not all frayed all over the place. And then I can put it through the hole so that it will fit, because a lot of times the string just does not want to cooperate and it doesn't want to pull through. Since I want to make sure both of them pulled through, there I am with my two twists that are coming through. And then I can loop it. If you did the yarn hat, you know what this looks like. Let's go ahead and loop it through there. So I have when I pulled it through, I've got this loop coming through, and I'll just put my two ends through that loop. Then I can go ahead and tie my two ends together for wherever I want to hang it. So if it were an ornament or something, or a gift tag or something I want to give to somebody, I can go ahead and tie these two ends together. This is just a regular tie through the two ends, and maybe that would be that for this one here. All right, and let me show you that one more time. I'm just going to go ahead and cut a string, nice long string. Okay, and I'm going to take my two ends here and twist them up because they love to come apart. So I want to try to keep those together. And I'll go ahead with put this through the little hole that I made until it comes out on the other side and pull. Okay. So when I have that and it comes through, I've got a loop. Now I don't want to let the loop go through my little hole that I poked in there. I'm going to go ahead and put my ends through that loop. And this is nice for points, so that kind of cradles them. You can see it sort of holds on to that point pretty nicely. And then to do this knot at the end, let me show you again. I'm just going to go around in a circle, right? And I'm going to, once I've made that circle, I'm going to tuck my two ends under it and pull through. And there's that one. So that way I have those looped. Now, regular one works very nicely. If you're making something super small, like a like small beads, or you wanted to make a pendant, you're just going to want to stick the one through and do just a regular knot. Make sure that you can see here. Put it that way. So I've got my two ends, and I'm just going to loop it, go over, under, and through, and pull. And I'll do it again. Under there, over, through the hole, and pull. And then that way I have that one, and that one's ready to hang up. And of course, if you made beads, you probably want to measure out your string on how long you want it to be first, but we're just doing this for demonstration. So if you're not happy with it, make sure you have enough string that you could cut it off and start again. And I would just loop it on through, string it on through. Maybe I have one beads, maybe I have a bunch of small beads. Now, if your beads are really thick like this one, and if it doesn't want to go through, make sure you twist that end, or you can grab something small like the end of this paintbrush here, something that's smaller than the hole that you made. This was smaller than the one that I made with that little piece of rounded wood that came with my brush set. So I could use that to sort of nudge the string in through, so it will go all the way through the bead. So depending on what you're going to do with it, maybe you've got a bunch of them, you're going to make a necklace, or maybe you're going to make a garland or something fun to decorate around the house. You want to get the rest of your beads together and string them up. So make sure that you have taken a photo and that you send it to me, and that you answer your questions about what you did with your project. And I can't wait to see what you create. Have a great time.